Kyle's got strong takes and only one place to let him out after he got roasted on X yesterday for some of his tweets.
Yeah.
But we got his
Terrible.
biggest takeaway of the weekend. What is it for week 14, Kyle?
Hey, look, there's only a handful of coaches I would come out of retirement to go play for. Dan Campbell is on the very short list. I love the guy. I love everything that he's done for the Detroit Lions. But I think that he is the best thing for the Detroit Lions and could potentially be the worst thing for the Detroit Lions. First and foremost, the injuries on the defensive side of the ball is forcing Dan Campbell to lean even more into this Riverboat Dan act that we've seen. And it's not even an act, it's just who he is. So I respect him for it. But we've been down this road before, Mike, haven't we? Haven't we, Mike? NFC Championship last year, big lead, opportunity to get out of there and get to the Super Bowl with the Detroit Lions. But no, they didn't end up there. It was the San Francisco 49ers who played the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. What I'm talking about is, and when we get into the playoffs and you play some of these big-time offenses, we know that we're going to have to match production. I say we as the Detroit Lions. They are going to have to match production. Dan Campbell is going to gamble. All the things that we love about Dan Campbell could lead them to be in a spot where Dan Campbell ends up with rioters outside of his house, pitchforks, torches. Why didn't you punt it? We should have just kicked the field goal. Take the points, yada, yada, yada. The other thing that I'm concerned about for this Detroit Lions team moving forward, and I think they're an ass-kicking group, and I think that they are the class of the NFC North right now. What happens when Ben Johnson gets poached? What happens when Aaron Glenn gets poached? Dan Campbell, tremendous motivator. You and I were talking about this off air. How is he going to be able to backfill that staff after this year? But this year, I have real concerns about that Detroit Lions offensive game plan, situational awareness, throwing analytics out the window. And I love David Montgomery as much as the next guy. Penei Sewell, I got his poster on my wall. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, sometimes you have to look at these analytics and make the smart decision. And I think it could be, come back to bite this Detroit Lions football team in the butt come playoff time.
Yeah, because the interesting thing is he's even more often than not, coaches err on the side of being less aggressive than analytics tells them to, right? Like the analytics often says to go for in situations where head coaches are conservative and don't go for it. They kick field goals or they punt. But Dan Campbell is legitimately breaking the mold and doing things in terms of going for fourth down conversions when the analytics is saying, hey, let's punt this away. Hey, let's kick this field goal. That's what's actually going to give us a better chance to win. So his aggressiveness has gone wholly on the other side. It's the whole argument that a lot of coaches say they trust their gut and the game flow of the game. That's why they don't go towards the analytics. But then every single one is more conservative than the analytics say. Well, Dan Campbell's the opposite. Now, I do think it's a live by the sword, die by the sword sort of argument with Dan Campbell. It's that when your 100%. Team has this full belief that we get 4 downs to convert, that you use the 4 downs. And with Ben Johnson as your offensive coordinator, you see it a lot of times on their third down plays. They will call runs on 3rd and 6+ more than other teams. They will
to make the 4th short.
Call routes that are intentionally short of the sticks at times that, you know, could use broken tackles to then convert, but aren't necessarily needing that and are easier than completions to make when that's the case, because a lot of times on 3rd and 8+, teams are guarding the sticks. So they know that they have 4 downs. And when that's the case, it makes your offense easier, in my opinions, on downs 1, 2, and 3. It makes you less predictable.
Yes.
And so it's a whole ethos that not only benefits them on 4th downs, you know, when they do convert a lot, because they're obviously one of the best offenses in the NFL, but just makes your life as a play caller a lot easier on downs 1 through 3. And so I think a lot of teams would benefit from it. But I do agree with your point that, you know, the final 4th down at the end of the game, they didn't convert that one. There would have been a lot of hell to pay. You know, and the Packers came back down and scored. There would have been a lot of, that wasn't even the analytics play. What were you doing there, Dan Campbell? So it is going to be a conversation going forward, but do we really want to question that out of the game? Like, I know other people are going to question it, but I think you and me should be at the forefront saying that this is actually the way more coaches should be. That if you build this ethos.
As a media member, I'm saying it could be a double-edged sword, one being bad, one being good. But as a football player, I love it. I love it because on Saturday night, when I put my head on the pillow and I close my eyes and I try to visualize the gotta have it, big situations, goal line, red area, third and short, fourth and short runs, I know exactly what's going to happen. There's no doubt in my mind that we are going to get the opportunity. And there's kind of a spectrum in the NFL. There's the guys on the sideline that hangs out with the head coach with the glasses on. He's over here. This is the safe part, right? This is the analytics. We're going to try to win the game safely. And then there's the players that stand at the hash marks and say, go for it, go for it. And then there's Dan Campbell, who's even further from those guys with the glasses, and he's gone past even the offensive linemen and some of the guys that you would imagine would want to go for it on fourth down. I respect the hell out of it, and I love what you said. Live by the sword, die by the sword. That's what the Detroit Lions are going to do. I just hope that that fan base is okay with however it goes, because it's gotten them so far. Why not see if it can take us to the promised land? But if it doesn't, if Jared Goff, if both of his knees touch the ground, if Jared Goff goes down on the handoff, whose house are you burning down? Are you going to go be angry at Dan Campbell, or are you going to just say, this is a byproduct of what happens when you gamble on situations like this?
All right, the other big storyline we wanted to touch on here throughout the NFL is a quarterback who has gone in the tank of late. Kirk Cousins, Atlanta Falcons, losers of 4 straight. Over that span, he's thrown 8 interceptions. Are we having a real debate about going to the 8th overall pick in Michael Penix here?
Man, I think at this point in the season, what do you have to lose? Because the trend is that Kirk Cousins is not the guy as of late. And we knew that at the beginning of the year, there was going to take some time for him to get physically geared up, ramped up, be able to run this offense. A guy that has been prolific in the play action game. You've got an offensive line that's set up to run the football. We've talked about it time and time again, but we haven't seen them utilizing his strengths, his abilities as a quarterback. And as of late, there's been really no strengths that I have seen from this Kirk Cousins-led Atlanta Falcons offense. We loved watching Michael Penix in college. It's a fun game to play. What if Michael Penix, Mike?
I'm turning the keys over to Michael Penix. Unfortunately, I've seen enough. You got your chance, Kirk Cousins, to see how you'd look against playoff teams the past 4 weeks, and it flat out wasn't good enough. And I didn't love going to Penix before this, because I didn't love the pressure of, hey, we're a first-place team. Keep us in first place for a rookie quarterback. But you ain't a first-place team anymore, unfortunately. The Bucs have passed you up. You got to come from behind now. And so there's not really any added pressure. It's like, yeah, you would love to get back in the mix. But if you don't, that was no different from where you were when you started them in the first place. So you got this long week. You play on Monday night against a Raiders defense that's fairly suspect. It ain't the hard matchup we just saw against the Minnesota Vikings. They're not going to throw a ton.
And they just had a quarterback injury, so they're not going to be too prolific on offense either. So it's a great opportunity. It feels like kind of a joint practice training camp type deal. You're going to go out there and duel against a guy that you are equal with or maybe even more talented than. And I think it's truly a break of glass in case of emergency type situation, and smoke is filling the room in Atlanta, and they need to get out of the room. And how can you do that? And it's not with Kirk Cousins right now. I think Michael Penix is the answer.
The only reason not to is if the owner says not to, truthfully, is if Arthur Blank comes down and says, no, we paid him too much money to not have him be our starting quarterback, because that is kind of it, right? There's no bench him now, come back to him next season, I don't think, unless Penix looks like a disaster. But I don't anticipate that, because they have a lot of talent at the receiving position, and they have a good offense coordinator there in Zach Robinson. Like, there is plays to be made that Kirk Cousins flat out cannot make because of the way his arm is at the moment. So, yeah, I do think it's time. I wasn't a fan of it before, but I think this week, if you're going to do it, this is the week to do it.